Have you made up your mind on what you'd like to do as far as action?
I sort of made up my mind. I mean, I can't tell you what it would be, but I sort of made it.
This Thursday, November 13, U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced Operation Sutton Spear, a mission aimed at eliminating drug terrorists and stopping the flow of illegal drugs to the United States.
Trump puts Venezuela on notice as the Pentagon launches Operation Southern Spear. This is now a named operation to target narco-terrorist networks across Latin America,
which has caused serious damage to American society. The operation is being conducted by the U.S. South Command, mainly in the Caribbean area, but that in total covers more than 30 countries throughout Latin America, including, obviously, Brazil. As Secretary Hegseth highlighted, the goal is to protect the country against what he called a coordinated action of Latin American regimes to flood the United States with drugs that are destroying tens of thousands of lives every year. But it was not clear by his statement if this announcement refers to the operation that is already in progress in the Caribbean a few months ago, or if the Pentagon launched a whole new operation with a broader scope. What we know is that the 4th Navy of the United States, highlighted for the operation, was reinforced with combat units and intelligence, with a highlight for the arrival of the Nuclear Aircraft Carrier Combat Group, the SS Gerald R. Ford, composed of destroyers and a nuclear attack submarine. A gigantic naval formation that was quickly removed from its outpost in the Mediterranean and sent at full speed to the Caribbean, where it arrived this week with its air wing already operating in the region. It is important to emphasize that the operation is not just a campaign against drug trafficking, with the regime of dictator Nicolas Maduro for years on the verge of international sanctions, facing growing military pressure from the United States. During the last months, the American forces, highlighted in the region, have already carried out 20 attacks on suspicious boats involved in drug trafficking, killing at least 80 people, in a campaign that the Trump administration argues to be a legitimate action to protect American citizens. The choice of such a great combat force, including B-52 and B-1 bombers that are flying in the vicinity of Venezuela, raises a series of questions. Is the presence of so many military forces really necessary just to face drug trafficking? There are indeed those who say that there is a much broader objective behind these actions, such as weakening Maduro's regime, and, who knows, even provoking a regime change, with President Trump saying on Friday, November 14th, that he has already decided what he will do in Venezuela, but did not give details about the actions he will take. If the United States decide to advance with more aggressive military actions, the targets will be carefully chosen to reach the regime's infrastructure and weaken its resistance capacity. But what would be the strategic targets within Venezuela, and what would be the impact of these actions? Venezuela has a large number of military facilities, including air bases, armaments, and command centers. Therefore, the main goal of an air attack or missile would be to disable the regime's ability to respond militarily. Locations like the El Libertador Air Base and the Santa Barbara Base, located in strategic points of the country, are possible targets, as they are important centers of operations of the Venezuelan Air Force, which includes combat aircraft and attack helicopters. These locations are also known for storing heavy weapons and long-range ammunition, such as Russian anti-aircraft missiles. Another potential target would be the regime's command centers, such as the Ministry of Defense building and the main cartels in Caracas. If these centers are hit, Maduro's regime will lose much of its capacity for military leadership and coordination, making it even more difficult for organized defense actions against new attacks. Besides the military installations, the United States can also concentrate their attacks against targets directly related to drug trafficking. Venezuela has been widely accused of being a strategic point for drug trafficking, with the collaboration of high government members with international cartels, such as the Cartel de los Soles, an organization linked to the Venezuelan regime and considered one of the largest suppliers of illegal drugs to the United States. The destruction of laboratories, tracks, and clandestine ports, as well as storage facilities in remote areas of Venezuela, could be part of this strategy. Venezuela has the largest oil reserve in the world, and the oil industry is one of the main sources of revenue of the Maduro regime. Therefore, targets within the oil infrastructure, such as refineries and drilling platforms, could also be an option. But some analysts believe that President Trump would not authorize attacks against these facilities, as it would affect the return of oil production in Venezuela after the fall of Maduro's regime. Therefore, the targets within Venezuela, if the United States advanced for attacks in Venezuelan territory, would be a mixture of military facilities, command centers, economic infrastructure, and places directly linked to drug trafficking. It could also include members of the Chavista regime, such as Nicolas Maduro himself, with each of these targets representing a tactic to weaken the regime and interrupt its operations. But the amplitude and intensity of the attacks will depend a lot on Trump's real goal. For example, if the goal is to just stop drug trafficking, the attacks will be more limited, aiming mainly at laboratories, tracks, and clandestine ports. But if the goal is actually a regime change, then we will see much broader attacks, aiming not only at military facilities, but also political centers, administrative, and also figures directly linked to the regime. Venezuela has already placed its armed forces in a state of high readiness, but they are not clearly capable of holding waves of missile attacks, and it is believed that Trump will avoid, at most, the employment of troops on the ground, at least in the initial phases of the attack. It is important to emphasize once again that the United States' goal with this offensive is not only to stop drug trafficking, with many economic interests also involved, such as the already mentioned giant Venezuelan oil reserves. In a desperate act, dictator Nicolas Maduro offered the United States access to these valuable resources, asking in return to keep in power. But Trump refused, a refusal motivated by his interest in having access to this oil, but without going through Maduro's regime, because it means that besides oil, Trump also wants a government in Venezuela more open and aligned with American policies. With this new operation gaining strength and with the U.S. military presence expanding, the situation in Venezuela remains very tense. The future of this operation is still uncertain, but the scenario indicates that the pressure on Maduro is far from being resolved, and the risk of an open conflict between the United States and Venezuela continues to grow. However, it seems to indicate that soon we will be able to see missiles crossing the skies and hitting strategic targets within South America. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any news. Sir, you had a missile on Venezuela. I know you tell us what your next steps will be, what you would like to do as far as action from Venezuela. I still haven't made up my mind. I can't tell you what it would be, but I still haven't made up my mind. What do you say to your, why not be excited about another? We'll see what happens. I can't tell you what it is, but we've made a lot of progress with Venezuela in terms of stopping drugs from pouring. But we have a Mexico problem, we have a Colombia problem, treating Colombia in the country,